Phumlani Majozi, the author of Lessons from Past Heroes. This is the Phumlani Majozi show. I'm with Olumayowa Okediran. He is a chief of staff for Students for Liberty. He was on the show last year when he and I were talking about the issues of poverty in Africa. How do we address the issues of economic progress, poverty, governance? So we discussed that last year. He is back now to talk about more on Africa. We will start with Nigeria. And of course, the reference in this discussion will be his book published in 2018 titled Navigate a Prospection of Nigeria's Future to 2030. Mayowa, how are you, sir? All good?
I'm all good. It's a pleasure to be here again. Phumlani, as always, and okay. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, my brother. I love your attire today.
Thank you.
You really do look like an African, Mayowa. Let's talk about Mayowa. Tell us about Nigeria, right? You are from Nigeria by birth. Um,
Mhm.
you've done great work there, with Students for Liberty. You've been following the politics, the governance affairs of Nigeria. What is going on in Rivers State? We heard this week that the president, Bola Tinubu, he declared a state of emergency in Rivers State. Tell us what's going on there before we touch on your book and how what is going on in Rivers State can be analyzed in reference to your book. What's going on in Rivers State?
Thanks for asking that, Phumlani. Rivers State is a state in Nigeria, in the Niger Delta region of the country, and recently it has become the epicenter of some political turmoil and security challenges. And it just ties to the culture of godfatherism that is not only prevalent in Nigeria, but also in many African countries, where you have people who have political clout, and sponsoring other people to go into political power, and as a result, you know, believe that they have some level of control. What's been happening is the former governor of Rivers State, who's now the minister of the Federal Capital Territory, um, Wike, and the embattled governor right now, or at least until a couple of days ago, Governor Simi Fubara. I've had like this conflict for quite some time now. Um, both sides have had this tug of war going on. And sometime in December 2023, Governor Fubara, because he anticipated that the state parliament was going to move to impeach him, led the demolition of the assembly complex, essentially the River State House of Assembly complex, using bulldozers. And this unprecedented move led to the maiming of one of the three arms of government, because you would have the executive, you have the judiciary, and you have the legislature. But, making the move to demolish um, the House of Assembly complex essentially meant that the legislative arm of government, could not function properly. So leaving a state of chaos where you had just the executive and the judiciary sort of functioning. And this has been going on for quite some time, and the judiciary had intervened at some point, but of course that was not properly addressed.
Mm.
So I think as a result of all of this going on, the president thought that it made sense to intervene. And while under the constitution, you have the president um, can call for a state of emergency when necessary in a particular state. The constitution is very silent on um, on the process of removal of a governor, of a sitting governor, is very clear. but that's not vested in the power of the government. So on March 18th, 2025, the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, declared a state of emergency in Rivers State, citing the need to address the escalating issues in the states. And he extended that state of emergency to include the suspension of the governor, his deputy, as well as all state lawmakers. Essentially, the legislative and the executive arm of government essentially sort of suspended, and then appointed what he called a sole administrator, which is unprecedented in our politics, at least within like a democratic setting. And so that has caused a lot of conversation around what's legal and what's constitutional. And we've seen calls by the Nigerian Bar Association that have criticized this move as unconstitutional. And it does sort of, in my opinion, sets a very negative precedence because when that happens, then, similar situations in the future, people would, it could be relied on as something that's happened in the past and basically sets a precedence for similar things to happen in the future, which, of course, it's not what we want. It's affected the democratic integrity, and of course, would have economic impacts on the state itself.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about this Rivers State. In terms of the economy in Nigeria, is it one of the powerful forces? Is it one of the states that contributes a lot in the economy? Should the world be worried about Rivers State and the impact that it would have on Nigeria's economy? Or is it one of the very small states in terms of economic productivity? What's going on from an economic productivity perspective in Rivers State? Anything to read into it?
Yeah, so Rivers State is one of Nigeria's most economically powerful and strategically important states,
Yeah,
both in terms of contribution to national revenue and just sheer geopolitical significance.
yeah.
Um, it's in the Niger Delta part of the country, which means that it's a oil and gas powerhouse.
Mm,
Um, it means that that's where you have Port Harcourt. Port Harcourt is the capital, and that's considered to be the oil capital of the country, right? So major
mm.
multinationals like Shell, Total, Ajip, and Chevron all operate there. We have the Trans Niger pipeline.
Yeah.
Rivers State contributes. It's one of the top three states to contribute to oil production,
Wow.
which accounts for about 80% of Nigeria's export revenue. And yeah, so that's and about 50% of government income. So it's very, very important. I mean, government income coming from oil. So it's very, very, very important. It's a very important state, and therefore very critical for us to be, you know, to
To
watch
ensure
what's
it's
going.
stable. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm. So now tell me, so let's talk about Tinubu, right? The president. How is he doing so far, in your observation? Is he taking Nigeria in the right direction? Where is he going, with the country?
Well, depending on how one looks at it, right? If you take a look at how he started, his administration is a mixed bag. There are bold moves on one hand,
Which year did,
and
was it 2, 3 years back, or when did it start, Tinubu?
yes, so he has about 2 more years to go, right? So, we are about 2 years into his administration,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Mm.
Um, it's when you take a look at his economic reforms, he's taken very what you call like decisive steps.
Yes.
However, there are concerns about the approach in which many of these steps were taken, and one of them is the removal of fuel subsidies, right? The floating of the naira that we move towards unifying like the exchange rates. So these are all politically risky but fiscally necessary moves by the president, right?
Yeah.
Um, because the existence of fuel subsidy in the country for so long has become very, very corrupt, right? And we
Mm.
also had like very different exchange rates, which were very made it very difficult for people to do business. Um, So there's a renewed focus on attracting investment, reviving like refinery operations. We've seen what's happening with the Dangote refineries, despite all of the drama around all of that. And there are also moves to push infrastructural development. However, while those are some of the things that we are seeing that we could point to as, positive in the sense that the there is a potential there to significantly improve like the country's economy. We are seeing a lot of centralization of decision making and power. Um, we're also seeing a breakdown of, I mean, like, and a good example is the suspension of this governor in Rivers State. That's very clearly, anti-democratic, right? So we are seeing things like that. We are seeing um, that civil liberties seem to be significantly rolled back. There are also concerns about state surveillance becoming, more heightened. We're seeing that there's, protest oppression, and there's a shrinking of the civic space, basically, that you could, to a certain extent, uh, create like some form of reminiscence of the military era. So essentially, what you're seeing here is a democratic system or a democratic administration that tends to operate like, it's the we're in the military dispensation. Um, some of the things that I mentioned in Navigate, I talked in one of the scenarios in 2018, the full cost scenario that economic growth could happen in that scenario could happen at the cost of individual and economic liberty. And that seems to be some of the things that are happening right now, right?
Sorry, can you
We,
repeat that? Can you repeat what you've just said now? One of your scenarios were or
oh yeah,
was?
so I was saying that in Navigate, one of the scenarios which was called focus,
Yeah.
anticipated is a system where you'd have economic growth, where the right decisions are made when it comes to, economic decisions. However, at the cost of individual and essentially individual freedom. What we are seeing right now is that so many things, so many economic decisions are being made that could have long-term positive impact on the country, right? Such as removal of fuel subsidy, such as, encouraging, foreign direct investment. However, in the interim, in the initial stages of, executing those policies, things will become significantly difficult, which is what we are seeing right now. There's a lot of economic hardship right now, as a result of those policies that Tinubu has put into place. However, it's going to be short-term lived. I believe that in the next couple of years, that things would normalize, and the things that are biting economically right now would significantly, become smoother.
Just now, you've mentioned a very important thing, Olumayowa, and I'm glad to have this conversation with you because you are a person who advocates for maximum individual freedom, an open society, free trade, free markets. That's what you advocate for. Um, you are saying that some of the decisions, some of the good economic decisions or economic reform will be done at the expense of individual liberty, of free speech, a governance um, that allows for free expression. In other words, there'll be a trade-off. That's what we are saying, right? Now, you are saying that will be you believe it will be short-term lived. Okay, fine, I understand that. Now, here's a debate. Some people have said, look, in Africa, we do need what they call, some sort of dictators, benevolent dictators, right? People who will come in and do things that will be beneficial for the people over the long term at the expense of free expression, right? Free media, free speech, individual freedoms. That there has to be the trade-off in order to move Africa forward or Africa's peoples forward. How do you counter that? And are you comfortable with the fact that the full cause that you speak of, one of your scenarios here, it seems that in that scenario, there's a trade-off. Are you comfortable at a values level with that trade-off, so long as it is short-lived, or you are against, since what comes first to you is individual freedom, free expression, and so on?
So to be very clear, the book Navigate has four different scenarios, right? And the exercise is to anticipate what could potentially happen, taking a look at trends, past trends, and also taking a look at some weak signals, essentially what's going on in the media, how people are talking about certain issues, and then anticipating what could potentially happen over the next couple of years. Now, in my opinion, that's just a pure academic exercise, right? It's not saying there is a preferred future. So when I said that the focus is one of the scenarios playing out right now, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's ideal. Now, I
What
think that
what is
what's
a
ideal,
Yeah.
what's ideal, of course, is essentially making sure that both individual and economic freedom thrive, right? You want a society where people um, are able to speak their minds and they're able to express themselves without fear of government repercussion, right? You want this society where, well, at least I want a society where, um, people are able to make informed choices for themselves without government taking away that decision-making rights from them. I also want while in that same society, you know, the ability for individuals to make economic decisions for themselves, to be able to trade freely without restrictive government, forces. So basically, a society that embraces both economic and individual freedoms. However, what we are seeing right now is that that's not simply the case. This administration has become a lot more restrictive of the individual freedom aspect of it. Um, and my belief is that that's not something that will hold for too long. I believe that in the near future, um, that's people will demand a lot more freedom of speech, will demand a lot more accountability from the government. Now, one of the tools and that's been happening for quite some time now, not just this administration, is the laws that are used to sort of gag people from defamation, right? So you'd see that when people speak on social media now or they voice their views, there is a fear that they could be targeted using anti-defamation laws. Um, and in government agencies or government parastatals, as well as individuals in government, are using those laws to sort of gag people from speaking their minds on social media, and that's become a trend. Where everyone now there's a joke that goes around social media now where people put allegedly in front of every single comments that they make just to show that because it's just to show that there is a fear that speaking your mind could land you in jail, or hearing your viewpoints could also put you in trouble. And that's not the kind of society that of course, want to live in, and that's not the kind of society that I think is ideal for us to live in as Nigerians.
Yeah. I'm speaking to Olumayowa Okediran. He is the Chief of Staff at Students for Liberty and the author of Navigate. This is a 2018 book, Navigate, a prospection of Nigeria's future to 2030. Remember to get my copy as well of my book, Lessons from Past Heroes. It's available at a bookstore near you. So I'm advertising two books today, Mayowa. It's your book and mine. That's the way it is, my man. Sometimes, so we are talking about Nigeria and hearing Mayowa's thoughts on the African continent. So, Mayowa, let's now tie our conversation to how you see Africa right now. I mean, where is Africa headed in your view? If you were to, I know I'm putting you on the spot here. with respect to your scenarios, I know you haven't done any academic work. Your book is more focused on Nigeria, but at a high level, if you were asked to think about your book and the scenarios here that you discuss, which are full course, the buffet, empty dish, and broken china, right? Those are the scenarios you discuss in the book. How do you think about these scenarios and Africa as a whole, as a continent? Because seems to me, in my view, Mayowa, and I was glad to see the Economist magazine in London this past January writing an entire special on Africa, right, as a cover story in the Economist magazine. And, their argument was that Africa is in bad shape because it doesn't have strong capitalism, it doesn't have strong markets, that the leaders in Africa have really not embraced the ideas of the free enterprise system, that you do need booming business, you do need corporates to come through in Africa and invest and also build African corporates as well. And that is not happening. I was glad to see the Economist highlighting that, this past January, because I think that's where the problem is. We don't have a good functional governance that embraces pro-market reforms. How do you tie your scenarios to Africa at a basic, high level? What do you see?
I mean, yeah, it's a fair question that you've asked, and it's one that we all need to wrestle with, especially for those of us who care about liberty, democracy, and the future of the continent. And you're right that my scenarios are mostly focused on Nigeria, or entirely focused on Nigeria. And there are a lot of other exercises or about other countries. Like Franz Cornier has written books on the future of South Africa, and there are other reports similar to that.
Mm,
I would say that right now, Africa is at a crossroad. We are seeing an alarming rise of executive overreach. There's in the shrinking of the civic space, and there's some backslide into strongman politics. And not just in one or two countries, but it seems to be happening a lot more in quite a number of countries. In Senegal, there were postponement of elections last year. In Uganda, we are seeing a lot of oppositions who are jailed. In Sudan, of course, that's engulfed in a civil war. And in Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea are all under military rule. Of course, with promises of democratic perpetuity or democratic dispensations sort of transitioning soon. Of course, that we know how that really goes across the continent. And then in Nigeria, we are seeing a suspension of governors and demolition of democratic institutions like the state's House of Assembly with bulldozers. So in too many places, power is consolidating, and the people are left watching from the sidelines, essentially. It seems like governance has been hijacked, and we are seeing a lot more of that across the continent. So that's a pessimistic view of what's going on. However, at the same time, we're also seeing something else, which is that people are much more politically aware than they are before, and thanks to social media,
mm,
especially young people, whether it's in Kampala or it's in Lagos, civil societies are becoming a lot more active. There's a growing refusal to accept the status quo. We saw protests in Kenya over finance laws last year, big protests, which made the government backtrack on their plans to increase taxes. In Senegal, we saw a lot of pushbacks, which
mm,
forced President Sall to reverse sort of his course. And in places like Zambia, Ghana, and Botswana, we are seeing a lot of young people especially use tech to voice their demands a lot more. So I believe that this is the Africa that we want to see, where people like you and myself are a lot more vocal, and we are pushing back against this consolidation of power that we are seeing across, many African countries.
mm. Do you think that people like us are going to win in Africa um, in the end? Because I was concerned in the last few years, in just recently, Mayowa. to see the coups, military coups, making a comeback, especially in in West Africa. I did see that. Are we going to win in terms of our fight for open, democratic governance? Are we going to win here at some point? How long will it take?
So absolutely, you are not alone in that concern, and the resurgence of military coups across Africa is definitely troubling. For anyone who believes in liberty and you believe in constitutional government and civilian rule. But let me respond with like from my point of view.
Mm,
Yes, I do. I genuinely believe that liberty will win, but it's not going to be by default. We're going to win because people are fighting for it. People are organizing for it, and they are refusing to be ruled by fear. But we have to understand that liberty is always contested. There is, at no point where you can say you have like total liberty. There's always going to be something that you always have to continually push back against.
yeah.
And what we are seeing right now in Mali, in Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger, that these coups just didn't happen out of nowhere. They were symptoms of a deeper legitimacy crisis. People felt abandoned by corrupt democracies, right? People, you're seeing a lot of support for these military administrations or military governments because people started disbelieving democracy. And things sort of went into a vacuum, and the men with uniforms and rifles sort of stepped in. So here's the thing: a coup would not fix corruption. Uh, no matter how much public relations or propaganda, and they are very, very, very adept. They've sort of learned from the politicians how to do propaganda really, really well. Burkina Faso is a very good example of that, right? And people will begin to eventually see that the military does not, the problem of corruption that they see also exists in the military. And then they will begin to lose interest or lose support, their support for the military. And that happened in Nigeria with the military administrations. We saw that they were, if not more corrupt than democratically elected politicians. And I think that the path to liberty is slow. It's messy. It's always going to be frustrating. But it's the only path that builds lasting peace and prosperity. And we have examples from the continent. We have Zambia, Ghana, Mauritius that have shown that what's possible when the institutions become a lot more strengthened. We have seen youth-led movements across the continent. There are Students for Liberty all over the continent. There are tons of other organizations that are promoting freedom and democracy across the continent. So we would not lose hope.
Yeah, we shouldn't lose hope. I like that actually. We shouldn't lose hope. I see here on your book, one of the commenters on your book on the front page, of course, is Professor George Ayite. He said, Navigate, a prospection of Nigeria's future to 2030 is a bold and important book asking questions and wading into forbidden territories, an exercise that is vitally essential, but where few would navigate. Of course, Professor George Haiti, he passed away last year. Was it last year or the year before, Mayowa? He was a very important man. He wrote a lot on free market economics in Africa. He was a distinguished economist, retired at American University in Washington, D.C. I believe he was Ghanaian. At least he was born in Ghana. Now, Mayowa, tell me in terms of when you look at Africa, where exactly are the opportunities? Because we've been talking about, people would say, as we were discussing, we were kind of negative. People will accuse you and I of being negative. We only looked at Africa from a negative perspective. Where are the opportunities in Africa, in your view, whether it could be in terms of governance, in terms of economic opportunities? What are the countries that you believe will be successful in future in Africa or in the near future, I should say.
So I get that concern, and I think it's valid. But I don't see that this being as being negative. I see there's clarity. I think it's
Clarity,
important
yeah.
for
Mm.
to be a lot more clear in what we are seeing. You can't fix what you refuse to see, is what I would say. But here's the truth: Africa is not short of opportunities. We are rich, not just in resources, but also in resilience, in creativity, and a very youthful population
Yeah.
that are very hungry for change. You see that across the continent. The young people, over 60% of Africa's population is under 25, and that's not just statistics, it's a signal. This is the youngest continent on Earth. With the right policies, with education, entrepreneurship, and civic inclusion, Africa could have the most dynamic workforce globally. We are seeing opportunities with technology and innovation. We are seeing a fintech revolution in Nigeria and in Kenya. You're seeing health technology startups in Rwanda. We are seeing e-commerce in Ghana. And Africa is just skipping that legacy system of going to straight. We are going straight essentially to mobile first, digital first solutions, right? So we are leapfrogging essentially. We're looking at what's happened, what we can learn from much more advanced countries with respect to technology, and we're implementing those in Africa. You can talk about Flutterwave, cheaper cash, pay stack, all of these different um, technology-backed finance-based solutions. We are seeing those all over, and it's not just in those sectors. We are seeing in agriculture, a lot of people adapting technology to improve agriculture, especially in the amongst young people.
Mm.
It's the creative economy as well. Look at Afrobeats, look at Nollywood, look at African fashion, look at the literature, look at comedy. Young creators are building empires from just Instagram and YouTube, right? And there also seems to be a lot of Pan-African collaboration happening, right? Especially around this Africa Continental Free Trade area, which is a game changer. If we implement that with integrity, it opens up markets, encourages cross-border investments. You can see reduced dependency on external actors.
Yeah.
So I think the framing of it, sometimes when you look at the challenges, it seems daunting. But there are tons of opportunities across the continent, and I want to speak to that as well.
Yeah. You see, my people might say sometimes that I'm negative about Africa. It could be mainly because there is very, very little progress on the key fundamental things that we have to get right. I spoke about the Economist cover story this past January. One of the very interesting graphs they had in the magazine was the GDP per capita gap between the world and Africa, right? The world has been continuously on the upward trend. This is the GDP per capita worldwide, whereas Africa has been sort of a very small increase over the past 30 years or so, right? And the gap has been widening. In terms of poverty, we've been really struggling to reduce poverty in Africa. Yes, it has declined, but it's very, very minimal decline in contrast to other continents around the world. We still remain the poorest continent in the world. So I just think that even when you look at the Fraser Institute's economic freedom, their index, even the Heritage Foundation's index of economic freedom as well, Africa's countries, they are really not doing well when it comes to, freeing up markets, right? Private property rights, or I should say property rights, sound, money policies, or monetary policies. So we haven't been doing well. Hence, for me, I just think that the key fundamentals, we haven't been getting them right. And that is why I end up sounding as if I'm a bit negative because I feel like we are left behind.
Mm,
greatly, Mayowa. There's really, you look at our poverty rates. I mean, we start at about 500, 800, to 1,000, GDP per capita. These are dollars. We are starting really at the bottom. And I'm struggling to see the issues of governance being addressed in Africa. If we still have coups in some countries, as have been taking place in recent years, it's really, really concerning. We have Mozambique, our neighbor here. There have been some serious political challenges there, and some terror groups operating there. I think there is really I think we are underperforming in terms of the leadership, the work we do as people to
mhm.
advance our continent. What do you say about that perspective?
Yeah, my brother, I would say that that graph is haunting, right? While the rest of the world seems to have consistent growth in GDP, GDP per capita,
Mm,
uh, Africa's line is almost flat, and not because we lack resources or talent, but because we've lacked the enabling environment that lets value creation thrive. That's improving, yes, and we want to continue to see things move in that direction. I think the governance gap is something that we need to address. Sort of bad policies, poor leadership choices, and state capture. Have choked sort of growth. They are holding holding the economic growth by the
yeah.
truth. And we're seeing
Africa
like
is one example where there's been some serious mess with respect to governance.
absolutely.
Collapse of many, including cities, Mayowa, including towns. Just the collapse of governance, and it's been very bad to see.
I mean, yes, like the failure of guaranteed property rights, like you've mentioned, being able to enforce contracts, those sort of basic things, right,
Mm,
um, are some of the challenges. However, I think that I'm very hopeful that things will change because I'm seeing some of this change happening, especially amongst young people who are standing up and who are very vocal about this. I mean, there are hurdles along the way, but yes, I think we are going to surmount that because on the flip side, the graph doesn't predict the future, right? It just tells us about, explains what's happening in the past and what's happening right now.
yeah.
But history can be bent. We can bend that with improving the outcomes of our future. We
Mm,
unlock trade
mm.
with Africa Continental Free Trade. We invest more in the youth. Those things are going to change significantly.
Yeah, yeah. Mayowa, great to talk to you, sir. The author of Navigate, a Prospection of Nigeria's Future to 2030, Olumayowa Okediran. So it's wonderful to talk to you, sir. To my followers, remember to subscribe to this show, the Phumlani Majozi Show. Remember to follow me on X as Phumlani M. Majozi. I'm also on Facebook, Phumlani M. Majozi. That's my Facebook page. I'm also on LinkedIn. Phumlani M. Majozi. Where else am I? Instagram, as Phumlani M. Majozi. And TikTok, as Phumlani M. Majozi. Olmayowa, great to talk to you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much and take care. Have a great day.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, my brother.